Boy, it's been an interesting couple of weeks for Premier François Legault. He was under fire for a lot of his statements in and around the National Assembly, especially when it came on the one-year anniversary of Joyce Echaquan's death. The Premier eventually apologized. Some people are not buying it, and our next guest is one of those people, saying that there might not have been much, there's not as much compassion from François Legault and the Quebec government as you might think. Christopher Curtis is with us on the line, reporter and founder of the interactive journalism project, The Rover. Christopher, welcome back.
Hey, thanks, Elias.
Hey, first things first, I should have called you Papa Curtis, shouldn't I? Congratulations.
That's very kind of you, man. That's very kind of you, my friend. I'm actually standing next to my daughter, who is waking up right now. So I'm sure we can get this out of the way before she starts howling for milk.
All right. I wonder, does it change perspectives on reporting when you've brought someone into the world along with the mother? Does it change your perspective on how you report?
I thought I'd be less angry, but I find sometimes I'm angrier because it's like, oh, my kid has to share the world with this jerk. Like, come on, man, don't be a jerk for the kid.
Okay. So let's get into it then, right? You just used the word jerk in your reporting at the Rover. You used the word that I'll abbreviate as BS on François Legault's compassion. You seem to be angry. You got some passion on this subject. Tell our listeners here, why are you calling the BS on François Legault's compassion for First Nations?
Well, I mean, if I could say I'm sorry to you, but if I keep doing the same thing, then I'm not really sorry, am I? It's just a word that I use. So I think when it comes to the Legault government, especially with the treatment of Indigenous peoples, like François Legault is he's the head of the only government in Canada trying to block Bill C-92, which is a bill that is universally acclaimed by First Nations children's advocates across Canada. By youth protection advocates. It's a bill that transfers control of youth protection from the provinces to First Nations themselves. So, I mean, the ultimate goal is that kids don't get taken out of their community, put into a system where they lose their language. They end up with a white family or in a white foster home, and they lose who they are. And a lot of these kids age out of the system, and a lot of these kids, sadly, are abused in the system, and some of these kids take their own lives because it's so hard. So this is a bill that seeks to remedy this gigantic injustice. And only one jurisdiction in all 10 provinces and 3 territories is contesting this bill, and that's Quebec. And so they can't come up with a really good reason why they're doing it. They just want to assert themselves, and I think that if you're really sorry and if you really regret what you said and if you really have compassion for Indigenous people in Quebec, then you wouldn't put Indigenous children in danger. And that's more or less what François Legault is doing.
You mentioned, they don't necessarily have a reason here, but I guess we can think of a few ideas.
They've made arguments before the court. They say that, and this is the irony of all ironies, that, François Legault is a nationalist, and that's fine, and he's a sovereignist, and in the past he has wanted and advocated for Quebec sovereignty. But that same sovereignty, he doesn't recognize that in the people who were here for thousands of years before any of us were on these shores. And that's their argument, that First Nations don't have the ability or the authority under the Canadian Constitution to manage their own child protection services. And it's an argument that I suspect will be laughed out of the court.
Does it go to their also, the steadfast, how they will not acknowledge systemic racism? Does it go to something else like control?
Absolutely.
Because this isn't, this isn't the first time in other domains the Quebec government is so stuck on keeping control or getting control of institutions. I can bring up English schools, for instance. They tried really hard to make it basically a wing of the Quebec government. They failed on that. Does it go into that more control?
Absolutely. I mean, it's federal funding, right? Like even though First Nations and Indigenous territories fall under federal jurisdiction, youth protection is controlled until very recently, youth protection was controlled by provincial governments. But that youth protection and that control gets funded by federal dollars. So really, it's Quebec could stand to lose hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, and that's a huge part of it. And another part of it, I suspect, is to be seen to be fighting Ottawa. Like that's François Legault weighed in on the federal elections this time and last time. He endorsed the federal Conservatives. His popularity is to be seen to be fighting Justin Trudeau, to be seen to be fighting the Liberals, to be seen to be fighting people who want to teach us lessons. And, again, it's ironic because he's doing the exact same thing to these First Nations. He's being controlling, overbearing, that sort of thing. And, I think ultimately a lot of his ideologies start to fall apart if he has to acknowledge systemic racism. And if he has to acknowledge that a lot of what we have in this country is the result of theft and dispossession. And those are things that not only, our English ancestors participated in, those are things that Quebec participated in as well. I mean, that we had a provincial ministry of colonization. That's not, you can't blame that on John A. Macdonald. I mean, he was a jerk too, but that's us. We did that. So when you start to concede these points, then a lot of your moral authority falls apart. And, and there's not much François Legault likes more in this world than authority, specifically his own. I'm sorry. I didn't sleep much last night.
That's okay, Christopher. With Christopher Curtis. He's the founder of the interactive journalism project, The Rover. We're talking about Indigenous issues and the Quebec government fighting in court to strike down Bill C-92. Now, Christopher, one of the things the Quebec government has said, or François Legault has said, is like, you know what, you want to focus on terms like systemic racism. We're not going to do that. We're going to focus on actions, right? We're going to focus on actions.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Yann Lafreniere, Indigenous Affairs Minister. Actions. So if he says we got to focus on actions, does he have anything to stand on?
Well, I mean, Quebec has also Quebec has participated in a system that transfers more power to Indigenous stakeholders, but they still, and that's good. Like there is a revolutionary model of child welfare in the Atikamekw nations, and Lafreniere's ministry participated in that, and they did a good job. The only thing is, like, that kind of autonomy that we get through the province to these First Nations is limited. The autonomy that they would get from this federal bill is basically it's complete, and it's so yes, they want to do good things, but they still, at the end of the day, want this kind of veto power, and they want power to say no when they want to say no, and they want to be left in control. And I think that's ultimately, that's the make or break thing here, is they are afraid of Indigenous people asserting themselves. And one of the other arguments that they've made in court, the lawyers for the Quebec government, against this law, is that the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, it doesn't really apply. It's not legal. It's just ceremonial. And they mention in arguments against a bill on child welfare, they mention natural resources. They say, well, if Indigenous people assert themselves here, then they're going to start asserting themselves on natural resources. So I think, again, it goes to this other aspect, which is they are afraid that, that Quebec wouldn't have final say on whether you can build a mine near a reserve or whether you can pass a pipeline through a reserve. And it strikes me as paternalistic, and it strikes me as not solutions oriented. It's solutions are all well and good, but if your solution always involves you being in control and you having the final say, and you publicly say, oh well, we're a nation to nation relationship, then it's not really nation to nation. You want subordinates and you want control, and I think that's ultimately, you can be a very nice person, but if you're not willing to cross that last part, that part about sovereignty and ceding power and ceding authority, then you're not really following through on this idea that you're taking action. It's kind of just smoke and mirrors.
Christopher, I don't mind if it has to do with lack of sleep. I'll take passion brought to the program for any reason. So thank you for coming on the show.
God, I'm so happy I didn't swear. That's the one thing I really didn't want to do today. But no. Thank you, Elias. Baby Wednesday, thanks you too. And she didn't cry, so I'm very happy with all of this whole situation. But she could have cried. That's fine. Babies cry. It's okay.
Christopher, take care. Thank you so much.
All
And
the
if you
best,
want,
my friend.
if you want to see the swear words, it's on the Rover, his latest piece, calling BS, but he uses the real word on François Legault's compassion for First Nations. Rover.substack.com.